So our network is made up of multiple companies underneath. And just like Sri from Verizon said, there's thousands of systems underneath here. And especially in a company of acquisitions, you just keep acquiring more orchestration, OSS, BSS in your back end. Where we're headed to in CenturyLink, this is really around NFV and SDN. That's really been the major technologies that are leading us to where we're taking our network in the future. And very complex orchestration and modeling is all behind this, and we're working to simplify that as much as possible with things like BPMN and the BPMS systems that folks have been talking about this morning to make those interactions with the environment very visual. But it's going to take some time to get there, and it's still, very much, there's still standards missing across the board. But where we're headed in our network is hardware-based networks or hardware-defined networks today are moving to software-defined networking. And we've developed some SD-WAN products and also some network-based security functions that have been in production since about 2014 in our network that service like our layer 3 VPN customers with internet gateway into like a private port layer 3 VPN service so that they have a secure UTM gateway service. Currently right now we're working on the traditional hardware-based CPE becoming a virtualized services platform. So basically in ETSI in 2013, 2014, we actually led POC number 4, which was distributed network functions virtualization, because within NFV, we were really making it to the head end or the central office, and that was the end of the NFVI architecture. So what we did is we teamed up with with an orchestration vendor, a CPE vendor, and then some VNF vendors as well, and we demonstrated using the ETSI Mano stack the ability to then extend into the last mile or the premise where the customer, inside the customer's telephone closet or telco closet, and that's going to open up a brand new model for our network. So instead of just terminating the WAN service, we're now going to have the ability, just like the iPhone model, and when I get to our orchestration kind of ladder, you'll see it. We're moving to a full-blown marketplace. I'm not telling you a secret that no one else is doing, because everybody's doing this. Carriers across the world are doing this. We're developing a marketplace. We're all developing marketplaces where customers can provide self-service, and so that we have an ecosystem of applications from every vendor in this room. And how do we get there is going to take automation, and so that's why we're all here talking in the room. It's not orchestration alone. Automation is part of orchestration, but it's the glue on top that we're going to be talking about a lot more. Fixed MPLS networks are becoming the software-defined networks, like Silver Peak was talking about this morning, and we do have that active in production in our network today. The specialized appliances that you see in the telco closets of the Apple Store, State Farm, the dry cleaners, you name it. Those are becoming, the telco closets are just going to become a server mostly. And so we'll be basically having a specialized WAN card and then a server. That WAN card will be able to do special, NPC functionality if it's like a high rate product, like 1 gig, 10 gig service. But then there's real estate that's available on that, or resources that are available on that CPE device that we're able to use then to spin up a virtual firewall, or even sell it back to the customer, like their point of sale system inside of their storefront doesn't need to be running on a server jammed in a closet, right? We can just run that little service for point of sale in a more secure PCI compliant environment instead of have it connected over an Ethernet cable off to another server. Application specific is becoming over the top. We have to be able to allow third parties into our network, and then we get into all the challenges like we were talking about up on the last panel of what's going to happen when we make this environment out there for everyone to use and consume. What's going to be the new service providers that even get created on top of CenturyLink that we don't even know yet, right? Everybody sees this one. Monolith everybody said monolith on the panels today. We are moving to API and machine-driven world. So what's been really important for CenturyLink in our architecture teams and our development teams, and you see us from like Jack Pugacheski across MEF and the Metro Ethernet Forum and in the IETF and other forums, is we're working to get those APIs standardized on the elements. And the Ciscos, the Infineras of the world here, and RADs and Siennas, they've all started implementing this API that we're getting standardized, right? And so if you look at a service like that's defined within Metro Ethernet Forum, when we get a Cisco box, a Sienna box, a RAD box, and let's just say another vendor X in the network, We basically have to orchestrate against their specific operating system. And what these standardized APIs, like in Metro Ethernet form, are creating for us is a CE, a carrier Ethernet API specification that every vendor would then implement on their CE certified gear. And so when we look at a CEXO certified MEF device, we know that it's going to have a certain set of APIs that we can go provision the MEF service on. And that's not going to limit the vendors from having special sauce beyond just the traditional carrier Ethernet services. We're just saying within that basic schema of the API for something like a MEF service that it should be these standards, right? And then any other advanced attributes would just be an API call to enable those. But it would also, provide you with a standard MEF product. And then if you want to deviate beyond that with a vendor-specific feature, then you would be able to enable that as part of your carrier Ethernet product too. This is all pressing towards the platform development, which is we have to eliminate the longer provisioning times for our customers. This is really getting into NFV, but it's important. So we view these 4 areas of our network as being the most transformative. And it started all in 2014 with our Terapops, and we deployed our first NFEI. And we didn't wait for standards. There was no reason to wait for standards or specifications from Etsy. We knew that we were making a transformation to use and adopt more enterprise virtualized systems. So we chose the hypervisor that was best suited in 2014, and that was VMware. And we took that out to 27 plus sites in 1 year. And we had a shock value back to the corporation because with not just deploying a single use solution for one product, we were able to produce a platform that any service could ride on top of. And so the very first product we developed was network-based security. And then what we found was our operations folks then started using those Terapops to virtualize their tools. So all the ops tools that they used to have to go put servers out on the network, really expensive NEB certified servers in the network, they were able to virtualize within what we were calling the program, or what we still call the programmable services backbone. Where we're headed to next is the premise. Central offices are very complex, and so are lit buildings, and I'll come back to those. But like I said in the previous slide, we're moving to the premise next, and this is hundreds of thousands of locations in our network. The premise solution is basically transforming our customer experience almost to the iPhone or Android marketplace kind of models, where you'll have this CPE device, and it will terminate the WAN service. But like I said, you'll have other resources available on that CPE device to then use for systems from our marketplace, like a firewall service through WAN optimization, you name the type of network service. Or like I said, you may have your own workloads that for your point of sale, your alarm systems or whatever that you may have had running on a traditional server or a desktop computer. Now you can just go headless or to a computerless, kind of desktop environment inside your office and then embrace things like VDI. Central offices, where we're going there, everybody that has a central office or head in this room from a service provider perspective knows the challenges. And when you're a telco, especially dealing with copper, these servers that we're installing for NFV, and why we're super sensitive about this is they put off a lot of noisy harmonics, RF, noisy, dirty RF. And if you're not taking your diligence and measuring that stuff in your labs before you go deploy it out in the central office, there's a reason for NEBs. And if you take a standard server and throw it in a central office and it's not properly shielded, your DSL train rates in that office can actually go down because you're getting off on the Cat3 and interfering it from an RF harmonic perspective. So we are working on multiple solutions to address our lit connected buildings, which we have thousands of those, and central offices, which we have thousands of those as well, globally. So this is an exciting journey. Data centers, we have a cloud product, and across all of these 4 tiers of our network, we're providing a platform. And so it doesn't matter if it's a premise device, the central office, or the Terapop, this whole ecosystem is built as one platform level. So you onboard, you orchestrate, you provision from a platform. And then if you're a team that's developing security, everyone uses and reuses the common platform to develop inside of. Where we're headed to in orchestration, and we haven't really talked about orchestration a lot today, but it's super important. Orchestration has automation underneath. So at CenturyLink, we've really been focusing on our automation on NFEO over the last couple of years, and then on our legacy provisioning systems, we've been getting those human-driven type scripts out of the way as much as possible so that we can have an on-demand NFV or a dynamic NFV service. So when a customer says, I want this NFV service, it goes out there. It's not waiting for a swivel chair process for someone to go log into a router and configure a VPRN or something like that. It has to be end-to-end. When someone requests the service, it has to be instantiated. So we've broken out our orchestration into multiple verticals, just like most of the service providers have. So all the way down at the bottom of this is hardware. And that doesn't mean just servers. That means physical network functions. That means optical network transport gear. It's dry contacts in our network. It's hardware, right? On top of that sits a hardware orchestrator layer. And inside of that hardware orchestration layer, we're addressing things like zeroizing the box after reuse. Say that it's coming back from one organization like security. When they check that box back in, if it's a physical network element or even if it's a server, we want to make that box like no one's ever been on it. So hardware orchestration is going to be responsible for the full life cycle of not only physical network transmission hardware, but also the new NFVI type infrastructures that we're deploying. Within functional orchestrator, you have things that are very domain specific. Okay, so what is functional orchestrator? So functional orchestrators are like our cloud. That's very domain specific to our public cloud offering. And then within our company, we have multiple other orchestrators that make up domain specific parts of our network, from access to optical transport networks to even CPEs that have like a SDN controller that conducts services down or instantiates services down on it. All of those are in the domain-specific vertical within our orchestration strategy. What sits on top is the master orchestrator. And then that master orchestrator is where we feel all of that automation glue that I've been talking about is going to live. And so if you visualize that you have, like I said, hundreds of systems underneath this macro or this master orchestrator, that master orchestrator is going to own that full forwarding graph and that full service chain responsibility, right? And why it's more automation on this layer is because you don't have the recipe to cook the meal. You just know who the cook to contact to go prepare that meal, or the DoorDash or Uber Eats to go API call to go provision that service, and it's responsible with its domain-specific orchestration role to go spin up the service. So where we're focusing a lot of the automation layers just outside of orchestration is in that master layer. But then we have to have flexible onboarding. And I should have really just took service onboarding on here. Onboarding in general, it doesn't matter if it's virtual network functions or even new metal in our network. We want to make that so that we don't have, in a SIMS team especially, all of these people sitting around testing products from vendors, right? Let's now empower our vendors inside of these cloud ecosystems that we're building in our labs to spin up their software, to bring in their hardware solutions where we have a hardware need or whatnot. And so we're working really closely with folks like SIM on how do we get that flexible onboarding so that we get into the labs so that we don't have to have a SME working in a proof of concept. Let's have the vendors come in on board in our orchestrator and inside our NFVI or inside of the changing physical attributes of a PNF or something like that. Let's allow them the flexibility to come in and demo back to us immediately, and something we can immediately move back into our proof of concept labs if it's something of value to us, right? So we want to move into this almost like scheduling like weekly demos. And so you can check out, Cisco can have it for a week, and then Juniper or something like that. So we're interested in anybody that might be offering that same type of service. Marketplace sits on top of everything. So it's not just the CPU devices, like I was explaining initially. It's the whole experience interacting with CenturyLink. And the marketplace isn't just something you see, it's an API as well. So we know that machines and humans are going to be interacting with our network. And so on this marketplace layer is the layer that you provide, like Azure or a cloud, CenturyLink cloud kind of API. We will allow customers to interact with their orchestrators or scripting. It could be as basic for them as scripting to be able to consume CenturyLink. And we want to get out of the way of our customers and let them get directly into the to the network. Biggest thing to take away as our mentality here is automate operations as much as possible, because this is so new to ops. You have to take the complexity out of this to be less friction with operations. So we are trying to automate as much of our operations as possible before handoff. And to do that, you have to have a very good closed loop service orchestration, meaning that you not only just send the API commands to go spin up the service, you test that after it's been instantiated to make sure that it's going to deliver what the service, the customer ordered. So potentials for automation across CenturyLink. We talked about it on the panels in detail. For me, it's fun to just step back from the networking side because we've been working on that for like the last 5 years heavily in SDN and NFE. But what if you look at CenturyLink from the perspectives of we have real estate, we have all this plant outside, we have all these muxponder transponders in the middle of nowhere. We have customers being activated, deactivated in our network. We have grooming activities going on in the network, augmentation. We have central office technicians moving around, humans. How do we automate all of this experience? Because if we're just going after the network, that's not going to change the customer experience because there's still a truck roll, there's still construction, there's all this going on. And so we're looking at new ways of leveraging automation, even if that first, connectivity into our network might be over a third-party wireless carrier. We're looking at those kind of capabilities as well. And looking at what does the next generation kind of wire center look like? Do we even need wire centers anymore? We're taking those critical approaches of looking at our network because our network in some locations in our metros are becoming very fiber rich and fiber connected communities. And if you look at technologies like NG-PON2 and XGS-PON, those control planes and the data planes live within the NFVI ecosystem. I actually have 10 gigabit GPON at my house right now, XGS-PON. And it's incredible what the gaming providers and the virtual reality and the whole entertainment experience is going to be like when they have close proximity to customers. And so what that means is we have to provide them the dynamic capability to consume this network. And it doesn't matter if it's physical attributes of a top-of-rack switch in our NFVI or the software that they're spinning up as a service. My general lessons learned, I stole something from Steve Ball, but I didn't tell him after one of our sync-ups, the automate or die thing, but I totally believe with that. My first advice, and we learned this with NFE, is that, especially this company the size of CenturyLink, we have some processes that have, like I said, 30 different items that you have to go touch from go request the IP for the trunks, go request the IPs for the actual interfaces for the customer, update circuit inventory. And what we found was that don't automate the entire process if you don't need to. So if there's another system that's taking care of getting the layer 3 VPN activation out the door, and we just need to we need to go focus in on automating, steps 3, 6, 10, 12, and 20. That's how we're approaching this to get new products out the door, so that we make them more dynamic for the new services coming out. And then on the backside, we're going through doing the realization of what our new orchestration automation systems can offer to allow our network IT shadow folks and our IT folks to start developing these model-driven type of modeling of the network. Don't automate badly designed processes. So we learned that very quickly too. If it's a bad process, just kill it. Find ways to resolve it or remediate it, but do not take a bad process and expect that just because you're putting automation in play, that it's not going to be a bad process on the other side. Don't reinvent all of your legacy. That's really hard for us because we acquired a cloud company, and so they look at us really funny when we're talking like SOAP APIs and things like that because they're in a REST JSON world, and if they look at our back end, our orchestration systems, some of them are really old, right? But they work and they do their job, and there's a lot of reasons why they're still doing their job, such as Telcordia reasons and things like that. And so when you're approaching this, embrace the legacy is my advice. And even if it's something slow, or even if it's something like a shell script you're having to go interact with, embrace it, identify it, and hopefully as part of your organization is transforming, this is being driven out of your orchestration stack. We talked about this a lot. Change is really hard, and this happens everywhere. It's happened in my entire life at CenturyLink because I've been in operations, like completely moving NOCs over to like brand new VDI and ways of looking at, telemetry from the network to, underneath the network, changing like how we did DHCP for like IPTV and things like that. People just like to do the standard ways of doing things, but it's hard to disrupt that, but it's a requirement. We have to change, or we're not going to be the same company we are in the future. So arm yourself with tools and knowledge. Someone catch me earlier, Mr. Carl Carney from Award. Get a basic scripting language underneath your belt, like a programming language like Python. I mean, don't jump directly into Java, but there's like 2-hour courses on Google that you can learn Python over the weekend. And if you're learning dictionaries and ways to use Python and express things better in a Python script versus Perl or a Bash script, those are more easier for developers to take and immediately get onboarded in an environment. So arm yourself with tools and knowledge. And don't panic because no one has all the answers. Because everyone's sitting here going, oh my God, how are we going to get to the next phase of all this? No one has all the answers yet. And so that's what we're all here learning. So I'm excited to hopefully have more events like this from Light Reading, just talking about this automation world that we're moving to. So thanks, everyone.